imagine that being a possibility anytime, anywhere. It's a really frightening possibility. And so the people who have IBS, a lot of the ways that a lot of my clients come to me is at first not so much that they believe that their mind has the power to cure them or to take away this affliction, but rather that they know that hypnosis can help them to relax and to deal with some of their anxiety. And they come to me because they have a lot of anxiety about the condition. Perhaps they need to travel, or simply they can't even be in a car going any distance. I live in Santa Fe, and a lot of the people here go down to Albuquerque. It's about a 45-minute to an hour drive, and there's people that I've worked with who simply can't make that drive because it's too dangerous for them to be in a car for that long. They can't go shopping. They can't go into a store where there's a lot of people unless they know exactly where the bathroom is, and they know that it's probably not going to be occupied. So it really plays on the mind quite a bit, and it starts to turn people into recluses who have this affliction.
Wow, yeah, it's pretty intense. So tell me a little bit about like how does it affect the body? I know Brandy and I have talked on the show a lot about the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic and sympathetic.
Right, and that's what this is all about. So even the medical community will say that this is a stress-induced illness. So what that means is that when you go into a stress mode, when the body perceives, to the body, stress is danger. Now, we've probably talked a lot about what stressors are, what constitutes a stress. Stress doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's basically any situation, any set of circumstances that is outside the body's expectation, outside the mind's expectation, constitutes a stress. So what happens then when the subconscious mind registers a stressor or a danger is it activates the autonomic nervous system to go into a sympathetic nervous mode. There are two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and this is review. Right. But the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight response. Right. So when that's activated, the body is preparing itself for immediate danger, for threat. And this is a sort of an older system if you think of evolutionarily how a human being evolves. Maybe 100,000 years ago, us humans had lots of threats that could take our lives immediately. You know, a tiger jumps out at you.
That big saber-toothed tiger.
That's right. And so you have to have your body ready for that. You have to be ready to fight or to run away. And so you need a lot of energy coming out, a lot of blood coming out to those big muscles. So where's it going to come from? Basically what the body does is it shuts down anything that it doesn't need to survive that immediate attack. So the places it's going to get these resources from are things like the digestive system. Right. You know, you've talked about the reproductive system is suppressed, the immune system is suppressed. All of these things happen when you get in a sympathetic nervous mode. But as pertains to IBS, think about specifically the digestive system. And for those of you watching, think about if you've ever had an experience where something was perhaps frightening you or you had a real challenge, something that seemed a little too intimidating, and you notice that kind of heavy feeling in the stomach, that tightening in the stomach.
Right.
Well, imagine if something was triggering your subconscious mind on a daily, ongoing basis with that same kind of reaction. And your conscious mind may not even be aware that such a thing is happening at all. But the subconscious, for some reason, has picked up on this present threat. And so it's continually holding that feeling of kind of constricting the abdomen a little bit, shunting blood flow away from the viscera, away from the internal organs in the belly. And so what happens is these organs aren't really functioning anymore, and they're not releasing all their enzymes right, and everything just kind of gets screwed up.
So, you know, we've talked about this again on the show where that fight or flight, there's actually a purpose for it. You have to go into fight or flight, but our bodies are only designed to be in that state for minutes, you know, either run from the saber-toothed tiger, fight the saber-toothed tiger, and then get on with your life, and we're designed to go right back to that parasympathetic, which is more about the homeostasis and balance. So I can only imagine that holding that kind of energy and that stress, especially down in the intestine and in the bowel and in all through that part of our body, how that long term can have such a devastating effect on people.
Sure, and you know, this is one of the things that, and there haven't been concrete studies on this, but there's a lot of talk in the IBS world about how IBS is kind of a disease of the industrialized world. That there are places in the world where it isn't known. Now you could say that it's not diagnosed, and that may be. But it's an interesting thought that to some degree it's a cultural problem. And it's because our lives today have, for so many of us, these constant low levels of stress and anxiety, and we don't really have any outlet for it. And so for some people that can begin to internalize in ways like IBS.
And these days it doesn't even seem like some people anymore, James.
Pretty much everyone.
What's going on?
Everyone except me and you, Mitch.
Everyone but us. Well, we drink kava.
And we do hypnosis.
And we do hypnosis.
We have tools. That's right.
You know, and yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, because I know, you know, I've worked with clients myself and have had great results with IBS, and I know you've worked with quite a few people, and that's one of your specialties. So tell us a little bit about, because I know self-hypnosis actually activates that parasympathetic nervous system, which takes the body into that really wonderful relaxation. So yeah, tell us a little bit about how hypnosis really does help with IBS, and maybe if you have a great story to tell about one of your clients.
I absolutely do, and you know, so this is the line that I give the doctors that I work with. The most basic and obvious reason why hypnosis is beneficial for IBS is, like we said, we know it's a result of a stress response. The stress response is coming from a sympathetic nervous condition. And so we know that hypnosis causes a profound parasympathetic nervous response. So the parasympathetic system is the balancer for the sympathetic nervous system. It's designed to bring the body back into homeostasis, back into balance. And so simply having that trance experience begins to balance out everything sort of neurochemically, and the body just starts to come back, blood flow comes back into the organs, and the digestion starts to move right. So right there, you know, anyone can see sort of scientifically how there'd be a benefit. Now, that's just the start. That's just going into hypnosis. But now let's talk hypnotherapy. So why does someone have IBS and someone else not? We talked about how we all have these. We don't want to make generalizations and say, oh, IBS means this or IBS means that, because it hasn't been conclusively shown. But one thing that I see pretty common, and you can tell me if you've seen this with your clients, is very often there seems to be some kind of a fear, some kind of an underlying fear. And maybe that fear has one specific cause, some trauma, some particularly frightful event in one's personal history. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just a sort of general strategy that someone evolves in life of kind of being afraid of things. And that's a strategy. And it's the kind of strategy that makes sense for a lot of people given their circumstance. So in my hypnotherapy, one of the things that I've found in a lot of these people who are working with IBS is that there are these fears, and the more they can identify them and begin to release them, the more the symptoms seem to go away. Imagine that. And the most extreme example I'll tell you of a gentleman who came to me. He was in Santa Fe for only a short time. He's from New York. And he told me his story that he was in Manhattan during the 9/11 attacks and subsequently developed IBS. And I thought, oh, well, there you go. You know, we've got the most immense stress imaginable, and all of a sudden he's got IBS. I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense. So we did a lot of work. We did a few sessions, and we did, you know, various techniques. We did some suggestion therapy and some imagery. We did some techniques from NLP, and he was responding, and he was doing well. The symptoms were steadily declining. And then finally we came around to doing an age regression, what we call CPRM, an age regression to the source of the feeling. And he had identified these feelings of being afraid and anxious. So I thought, well, of course it's going to go to 9/11.
9/11, right.
So we do the regression, and he comes to a time, and it's in his adult life, and he's in New York, and I figured, here we go. Then it turns out, no, it's before 9/11, and it's some very minor health issue. And he's going to the hospital, but having this tremendous fear that something terrible is going to happen, and it's such a minor issue. I thought, well, that's odd. Let's go back further. And suddenly now he's a young man, a boy, and he's with his friends, and they're playing baseball. And there's an accident, and one of his friends dies.
Wow.
And so here's this young boy who decides in that moment, life is dangerous. Death is right around the corner. It can happen to anyone, anytime, just like that. And so some part of his mind decides that at that moment, and he does okay, you know. He's a evolved human being, and he copes, and he gets through life. But then when 9/11 happened, it triggered that sense of unexpected threat so powerfully, boom, full-blown IBS right away. So we did the regression, and he got to release a lot of the emotion, the energy around that experience in his boyhood, and kind of make some peace with all of that. There was some forgiveness involved, and then he came to me the next week, sat down in the chair, and said, well, it's gone. I said, what?
It's
oh,
amazing.
the IBS, it's gone. But let me tell you about something else. You know, and that was it. And that was the end of his symptoms. And I spoke to him about 8 months later, and he still had no recurrence of symptoms. And so hopefully that's maintaining now. And if you're watching, keep up the good work.
Yeah, excellent. That's a great story, James. So